Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Hakula. I am a restoration coordinator with Friends of the Rouge, and will be presenting this presentation today with my dear coworker, Irma at Sierra Club. I'll let you introduce yourself, Irma.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to see so many people joining us this morning. I'm Irma Liebhart with Sierra Club Michigan chapter. And again, welcome.
And Irma wants to make sure that she has the best audio today, so she's joining on her phone since her internet goes a little in and out. So we do apologize in advance if there's any issues with that. But please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We will have a Q&A section at the end to go over all of those beautiful questions that you have. So does everyone see a Q&A feature at the bottom of their Zoom? If I could get a thumbs up, or if someone wants to come off the mic and tell me if they see that on their end.
I don't see it. Where's it at?
It should be at the bottom panel where it has like the mute video. I wasn't seeing it on my end, so I was just making sure that everyone else maybe has.
Yep, I see it now. I got you.
Okay, great. Yes,
Sorry.
so if anyone has questions, that is going to be the best way for us to keep track of those, since the chat sometimes gets a little long. But please feel free to communicate in the chat too, add on any little comments. If you have a rain garden yourself, add your little tips and tricks in there along the way. But we'll go ahead and get started today. So a quick presentation overview to Rain Gardens 101, a simple solution to water pollution. So first, we'll be discussing briefly just our organizations of Friends of the Rouge and Sierra Club, and a little bit about what we do. And then we'll get into what's the problem with stormwater in Southeast Michigan. And then we will talk about what is a rain garden. And then we'll kind of go into more of the details about how to create a successful rain garden and maintain it. And then we will hear from Carolyn Pruitt, a current rain gardener, previous program participant. And then we will go into our Q&A. And just one more thing that I wanted to turn on. Okay, that should be good. Okay. So to get started, let me tell you a little bit about Friends of the Rouge. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're located in Plymouth, Michigan. Our mission is to restore, protect, and enhance the Rouge River watershed through stewardship, education, and collaboration. And our vision for the Rouge River is a clean, vibrant Rouge River at the center of our communities, where individuals and community action protect and improve the health of the Rouge River, assuring its natural, economic, and recreational values, and enhances the quality of life for all of our community members in the Rouge River ecosystem. And if you'd like to learn more about Friends of the Rouge, you can go to our website, therouge.org. Now I'll pass it over to Irma to speak a little bit about Sierra Club.
Good morning again. So Sierra Club, as a national organization, is been in existence since 1892. So we've been around a long time. And our overall mission here at the Michigan chapter is to explore, enjoy, and protect the Earth's wild places. And you may have heard of a recent 30 by 30 initiative. And the point of that, of course, is to protect 30% of the land and 30% of the water so that we have these wild places to visit and to enjoy. We also practice and promote the responsible use of the Earth's ecosystems and resources, our vital natural resources like our fresh water here in the Great Lakes. to educate and enlist all of humanity to protect and restore the quality of our natural environment. With climate change, we've been talking about this as being an existential crisis and that we need an all hands on deck. And that speaks to the fact that all people, all of humanity are needed to protect and restore our natural environment, and to use all lawful means to carry out these objectives. And to learn more, you can visit our webpage at sierraclub.org/Michigan. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Irma.
And so I kind of referenced the Great Lakes, and we like to think of this region as the big picture. Water is life, and we are fortunate to have 20% of the world's fresh surface water. And you can see it displayed beautifully in this picture. And also the Great Lakes, the fresh water that we have is also 90% of the fresh surface water in North America. So this is a major benefit to us, a major access to this life-giving resource. And so we have an obligation certainly to protect it and to and also just the benefit of being able to enjoy having fishing and recreational opportunities and great source water, the water that we use for drinking. In fact, we have about 40 million, the Great Lakes provide water for about 40 million people in both the US and Canada combined. And so as we begin this discussion today about rain gardens, it's important to understand, well, how does what can I do, or what is my role in protecting this fresh vital resource? So we need to look or begin to start from a watershed perspective. And basically a watershed is the area of land that drains to a particular water body. So Jackie has here a beautiful diagram, the leaf, which represents a watershed. Now, and to the right is actually in the outline, you can see the Rouge watershed. But the leaf shows that, there are main rivers, right? But what feeds those rivers are tributaries of streams and creeks, or sub-basin type of, well, those are the boundaries on land. But the streams and creeks and wetlands, they all contribute to and feed into our larger rivers that we see, which then flow into our lakes. And so what we do on land, again, significantly impacts our water quality. So if we're fertilizing, putting down pesticides, the oil from our cars, any of that on the ground, on the land, once it rains, has the potential to wash into our water bodies. And we'll talk more about that. And Jackie's going to talk a little bit more about the Southeast Michigan watersheds overall.
Thank you, Irma. Yeah, so here is a map of our Southeast watershed watersheds. In yellow here is the Rouge River watershed. To our northeast, we have the Clinton. To our west and south of the Rouge, we have the Huron. And in between the Huron and the Rouge, we also have Ecorse Creek. And below that, more downriver, we have the River Raisin. As you can see, we cover a large majority of Southeast Michigan. And all of these rivers and everything that we do on the land ends up in Lake St. Clair, the Detroit River, and eventually Lake Erie. So as Irma was saying, everything we do on land also affects the water where it ends up. But no matter where you are in a watershed. So if you live outside of one of these watersheds, I highly encourage you to look that up. It's just a quick Google search to learn more about what watershed you live in and how to advocate for it. And then I'll pass it back over to Irma to talk a little bit more about the problem with stormwater.
Okay, so this looks like it's showing a variety of land types. Jackie, can you see this?
Yes.
As opposed to the permeable, the impervious surface and Detroit slide. There, that's the one. You snuck one in on me. You can go back to that. I can speak to that. I'm just, so this shows, it looks like the watershed for Lake Erie. So on the right, the upper Thames and the Sydenham and lower Thames are watersheds in Canada and Ontario. And no, this shows, oh, those are other watersheds. Okay, I see now. So we've got the Clinton, but they're watersheds, I'm sure, that are draining to Lake Erie. And I know this because there was a research study that U of M did a few years ago, where they looked at the phosphorus loading from the watersheds that feed into or lead or flow into Lake Erie. And that's because one of the problems is that Lake Erie, the Western Basin, is plagued by harmful algal blooms. So we can go to the next slide now. And what we've got pictured here is the impervious land cover in Detroit. And we're showing Detroit because it's, the largest city, a major city in Southeast Michigan. But in fact, we've developed a lot in all of Southeast Michigan and in other parts of the state. But we've covered over a lot of our land and natural spaces, our green space. And that becomes problematic because when we have these heavy storms, these intense rainstorms, it hits this hard surface, these hard surfaces of roads and sidewalks and our homes and other buildings. And it doesn't go into the ground. So it flows from these hard surfaces into storm drains, or in the case of Detroit, into what we call a combined sewer system. And that means our sewer system has both sewage in the pipes as well as stormwater. So the other thing that our development has resulted in our strong past of an industrial city is it's led to both the Detroit River and the Rouge River being declared as areas of concern, basically degraded water bodies. And so we've been working on that through the Great Lakes Legacy Act and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to try to bring about improvements to the habitat and the water quality in these areas in Southeast Michigan. And if you're interested, there are public advisory councils that help to, what are the solutions to bringing back and restoring these areas of concern, and be happy to share more information. If you're interested, just put a question in the Q&A and we'll get back to it. So next slide shows, in fact, this combined sewer system. It shows that water that travels down your driveway and along the curb end up in this drain. Now here's a storm drain, and there's no filter at the end of this. So whatever the water, this rainwater picks up, comes storm water, because it now has pollutants in it, is carrying the pesticides and fertilizer, etc. And so it flows then mixed with the rainwater directly into our water bodies, even with those contaminants. And then on the bottom, we have the pictures of its outlet. And when with the combined sewer system, when we have a lot of storm water mixing with the sewage and it exceeds the capacity of the system, then it flows directly into our rivers. And the next slide shows, again, another example of how it flows. You can see a little bit of the oil in the bottom left picture, some of the oil that gets washed off the roads directly into our rivers. And, we're not here alone, right? So this is our doing, but we're infecting the homes of our turtles and frogs, our amphibians and our birds, fish, wildlife, because this is water they depend on as well. So the next slide shows just these dots on the page are showing these outfalls that we saw in that bottom right picture. These are places where the excess, when the system is overwhelmed, it flows out of these. Now, some are not as active as others. There are some that are worse, meaning there's more release from some of these than others. But still, there are 55 uncontrolled CSO pipes that flow into the Detroit and Rouge rivers, and these are where they're located. So we've got a job to do, and Jackie's gonna help explain more about what we can do.
Yes, you can make a difference in our water quality and preventing pollution today. So some of the best tips that we can give you are using slow release or low or even no phosphorus fertilizer on your lawn, or just skipping the fertilizer altogether. We'll be talking more about some of the plants that we use in our gardens and how they're able to adapt with no fertilizer whatsoever. And as Irma mentioned, fertilizer is a really big pollutant of our urban waterways, and especially in the Great Lakes and Great Lake Erie as well. So if you do use fertilizers, we definitely want you to sweep those up and keep them off the paved surfaces and out of drainage paths. That way, when it does rain, it's not carrying that fertilizer with the water as well. Another thing you could do is if you wash your car, especially frequently, we suggest going to a car wash where they can reuse the water and clean it, or just doing it on your lawn. So instead of having all of that soapy water kind of roll down your driveway and end up in a storm drain nearby, it just soaks right into your grass. So that's a better alternative. And then properly disposing of all household hazardous materials. All communities, or even sometimes the county, will have household hazardous waste days. So we highly encourage you, if you have old paints, old fertilizers, pesticides, anything like that in your garage that you find while you're spring cleaning, save it and take it to one of those, and they know how to properly dispose of it and keep it out of our waterways as well. Another big kind of fertilizer nutrient pool that we have across our region is everyone's furry friends. So we ask that you pick up your pet waste, especially before it rains, because some of that can be also carried into our waterways and considered a pollutant as well. So our pictures on the right here, the top photo is a fertilizer bag with 3 numbers separated by dashes. So on your fertilizer bag, it'll have 3 numbers. The first one is your nitrogen. The middle number is that phosphorus. So that's the one we want to look for, a really low number or a 0. And then the last number is potassium. So those are the main nutrients that plants need to survive and thrive. And then the bottom photo is a really clogged storm drain, some with leaves, and there's also a lot of lawn treatment signs that end up there too. So if your sign ends up there, all of those fertilizers and chemicals are most likely also making their way down there as well. And then if you want to go above and beyond, you can take other actions like minimizing paved surfaces on your property, taking out that big deck slab that you might not use, just kind of putting the lawn back. Alternatively, reducing your lawn size. So instead of having just that Kentucky bluegrass, we want you to restore native habitat with native plants, some other landscaping plants. It provides quality habitat for our wildlife and pollinators. As far as storm water, directing your downspouts to a vegetated area, so a lawn or like we're going to talk about, a garden, rather than say your driveway where it's just going to run across those paved surfaces, picking up the pollutants along the way. You could also capture storm water with a rain barrel. So that is like a limited size. Most rain barrels are 50 to 55 gallons. So if you do that, you'll probably want an overflow hose, also going to a vegetated area away from your home to capture that water. And what we're all here talking about today and excited about is creating a rain garden. That's our next step up for improving water quality. So what is a rain garden? A rain garden is a garden with a purpose, and that purpose is to capture, store, and infiltrate stormwater. And kind of our little tagline that we used for our Rain Gardens 101, capture the rain before it hits the drain. So like we were talking about, that's going to prevent pollutant runoff and additional things that we don't want in the river, keeping them out, putting them in the garden, and having the plants do the work for us. So this is a brief overview of the general anatomy of a rain garden. And we can kind of go a little bit more in depth. So here is our example rain garden. To the left, we have our home with a downspout. This home has a foundation or a basement. So when building your rain garden, you want to be at least 10 feet away from a home or a building with a foundation or a structure. And that's just because when the garden is holding that water, we don't want that water close enough to the foundation. We're going to get cracks or any water damage. So the goal of a rain garden is cause no harm. So we want to be improving our water issues and not creating more. Alternatively, we also suggest staying at least 3 feet away from sidewalks or driveways as well for that same very reason. You don't want to be holding water under the sidewalk, having it crack. So that's more things you had to pay for. And we don't want that. There are gardens that do go up to driveways and sidewalks if you're out and about and you see a rain garden. A lot of our master rain gardeners are sometimes capturing water off of their driveways. So there are some varying techniques to make sure that that's not going to be damaging any of your structures. So one of the first components of the rain garden piece is a depression. So we usually dig 6 to 8 inches of soil and take it out. This is depending on your soil type. So there is a way to find out kind of what soil type you have. You can either dig some up and kind of just feel it. So if you have really clay soils, which is a lot of locations in Southeast Michigan, you can dig a little bit deeper or make your garden a little bit wider to accommodate that. And the bottom of the basin, we like to keep as level as possible. That way, when it's capturing water, it's evenly dispersing that water throughout the garden. And you're not going to have like really, really wet spots that aren't going to drain as quick. The next is the inlets and the outlets. So for it to be a rain garden, it has to be capturing some stormwater. So in this example, it's taking some rainwater from that home downspout. And in this case, just across that turf grass, the lawn grass doesn't really absorb much. So in this case, it'll kind of act more as an impervious surface and kind of just roll right across into the garden. You can also put a more direct pipe into the garden. You can either have that above ground. Sometimes we like to bury a pipe underground. That way you can still mow over that grass. You're not going to have a tripping hazard. And then for the outlets, on this downhill side, we have what we call a berm. So it's kind of like a little retaining wall for your rain garden. And that's just to help keep in all of the water, especially during heavy storms. But if we do get a really, really heavy storm and your garden might not be able to take on all that water, you do still want a lower spot somewhere in the garden that's also going to a vegetated area for an overflow, just in case. And then once you kind of dig out your depression, we like to add back in some compost. It's not very necessary, but it does help the plants first get established, make sure they have all the nutrients that they need. And if you do have those really clay, like thick soils, you could also mix in some sharp sand to those soils, and that is going to add pore space for that water to be held in the garden. And then next, our favorite part is our native plants. So we choose Michigan native plants that are drought tolerant. They have really deep, dense roots that help break up the soil and pull down that water. It also helps filter and clean any of the pollutants, because when the plants respire, they're giving off the nice, clean water. And of course, native plants support native pollinators. So if that's one of your goals for your yard, we highly support that. Our pollinators do so much for us, and the least we could do is give them some beautiful flowers in our yard. And then we finish it up with a nice thick 2 to 3 inch mulch layer. This is going to help retain some of the moisture and water in your garden, as well as be a nice little barrier to shade out any weed seeds that might be in there. So that is our overview of a rain garden. And then how to create your rain garden. This is kind of our step-by-step 1 through 8. First, you're going to select the location. Then you're going to determine how large you want your garden. And then we're going to look at which native plants are going to be best in that garden. And then we're going to prepare the garden area for our planting. Then we're going to direct the rainwater into the garden to make it our rain garden. We're going to plant those beautiful native plants, cover it with some organic mulch, and then, of course, maintaining it long-term to keep it beautiful and functional. So now we're going to kind of go into each of these steps. So when you're selecting your location, you want to keep in mind what kind of goals you want for your yard, as well as kind of taking an inventory of what is around your home. So say, for instance, we have this slope that's really difficult to mow. We want to keep a play area in the back for our kids. We really like the view of the river from our patio, so maybe not putting it here if we want to keep that nice, beautiful view there. We could look to our south if we wanted to add privacy between you and a neighbor. We have another difficult to mow slope as well. So maybe that might be a good spot for our garden. That way we don't have to mow that area. Or maybe we want to add interest or view to the side of our home too. So you can keep in mind of how other folks will see it outside, as well as if you're just looking out your window and how you want to enjoy it. And number one, we definitely want you to call Miss Dig while you're planning, and definitely before you dig, they will come out and mark any of your utility lines. So that will be another area where you want to avoid putting your rain garden as well. Typically, the service lines are really deep in the ground, but just so, again, so we don't cause any more harm, we're going to avoid those areas. In case they did need to service those, we don't want them ripping up all your beautiful garden as well. You'll also want to take into inventory kind of the site conditions for the plants. So how much sun it gets, whether it's full sun or some shade, if you have really wet areas. So all of those things you will want to consider when selecting a potential location for your rain garden. And then again, going into some more site selection. This is a really nice and simple overview of a rain garden and general placement. Again, we want to be at least 10 feet away from a home with a foundation, so we're not causing any harm. But we do want to be within 30 feet. So the farther you get, the harder it might be to pipe over that water. We want to make sure that we're keeping a consistent slope towards the garden, so we don't have any water backups in the tubes, pipes, or gutters as well. And then sizing your rain garden. So we want to make sure that the garden is large enough to capture all of the storm water that it's going to be receiving. But at the end of the day, this piece doesn't have to be too technical. A rain garden of any size is going to be doing some work. So that is the valuable part of a rain garden. Again, here it kind of shows the 10-foot boundary around the home. This one's nice because it shows all of the different gutters around the home, as well as the pitch of the roof. So you could have it a little bit closer to your home, or within that 30 feet from your home as well. And a good way to kind of look at your home's roof area, you can go on Google Maps, and they have a really nice aerial photo, and you can kind of zoom into your home and measure it that way. Or if you just kind of know the dimensions, just with a regular tape measure, that works perfect as well. And typically the sizing of a rain garden to the impervious area where it's capturing stormwater, so in this case, a roof. The good rule of thumb is at least a fourth of the size of the impervious area will be your rain garden size. Again, that might be dependent on your soils. So if you have really clay soils, you'll want to go either a little bit bigger or a little bit deeper. Alternatively, if you have really, really sandy soils, so that water isn't really pooling on your lawn, you might even have really dry areas in your yard if you have really sandy soils. For those kind of soil types, you could go a little bit smaller. But at the end of the day, it's your garden and your property. You know kind of what you want and how much space you overall have. So those are, of course, important considerations too. And then I'm going to pass it over to Irma to talk a little bit about native plants and why we choose those over some other landscape plants.
Hi, thank you, Jackie. What a great overview of what a rain garden is and all the different components. Very key. Thank you. So the next really big thing after you've determined your location and the potential depth of your rain garden is to select the plants. So we use native plants, native to Michigan, native to this area, because they're more drought tolerant. They can basically, they understand our climate. So they know that, we have very wet springs, but then a dry summer and, and variations for fall, but they're already accustomed to this pattern. But what you see here is really important. Native plants also have very deep root systems. And this is what makes them so awesome for a rain garden, because basically the roots create pores or openings in the soil that allow for the infiltration of stormwater or rainwater. And so we pick native wildflowers, grasses, trees, and shrubs that are adapted to these fluctuating water levels. And I want to kind of point out to you to the far left, this is your lawn grass. And you can see with the lawn grass that the roots are not very long. In fact, they're extremely short. And so even though we don't count lawn as an impermeable surface, it really isn't very good at managing stormwater versus these other plants, the native plants, some of which can grow have a root size up to 15 feet. I would think the average is perhaps more 8 to 10 feet, but basically that's a lot of root, especially compared to our lawns. And so this is the ideal. This is what we want people to plant. And we can go to the next slide. And so the planting design. So there's a question already asked about someone who wants to attract butterflies and hummingbirds and want to have kind of a little bit of privacy built in. And all of these things are important in what you want to, the questions you want to ask as you are designing your garden. The design styles can be natural, meaning just more, they're wildflowers. So maybe you just want a beautiful kind of wildflower prairie look, something that's attracting those birds and hummingbirds and butterflies, like your swamp milkweed. Or you want something more traditional. You see this pictured here at the bottom right. This gardener wanted something a little more more formal, more traditional. And so she planted probably fewer varieties, maybe some low growing speed, the height is not very high, and possibly, a single color palette, or maybe two color palettes, a 2-color palette. And key also is to plan with maintenance in mind. The native plants do not require a lot of maintenance, especially particularly when they're established, but they're not no maintenance. Maintenance is absolutely necessary to keep your garden looking beautiful. So that means maybe cutting down in the late fall, or not. If you want to provide habitat for animals, you might not cut it. It'll look maybe a little brown, a little weedy, but just you can feel good that you are providing food for the creatures. But you want to weed it, and you want to make sure that if we are going through a drought period, put a little water on it. It needs to be watered. And plant selection is absolutely key to the success of your garden. We do recommend that you plant in threes, and I think that Jackie will talk about that a little bit more. And the garden to the top there, what you see, there are 3 things planted, which make for a little easier maintenance. The orange is the butterfly weed, attracts butterflies. In the middle, you have purple coneflower, which is fairly tall. It's strikingly beautiful. It's this purple. And then around the border, you see what's potentially some type of grass or sedge. So next slide. So here we have a sample rain garden plan, and we highly recommend that you do this as you're planning your garden. You can use a sketch pad or any plain piece of paper, or in this instance, some graphing paper, and think about first, what are the plants that you want? And here are pictured 8 plants, 10 plants, 2 at the bottom. And these are those selected, and I'm sure they're selected based on height, color, blooming. The blooming time is key, because we want our garden to be in bloom most of the season, or most of the year. We want some attractiveness to it. So perhaps one blooms, early in the spring, one's mid-spring, and one's, you identify your plants based on that feature. And then you determine where you want to locate them. So this is beautifully sketched, and it also shows the shape of the garden, kind of circular with some wings. And, there's a couple of shrubs where's your sidewalk, your porch. You can see they put 10 to say, okay, this has to be 10 feet from my porch or 10 feet from my foundation. And so just a very, very helpful practice to design it, put it on paper, imagine it. I've seen people do these diagrams and actually put pictures like these pictures that are shown here, they'll put them onto the diagram, kind of cut it out and have little pictures of it, or draw the pictures, or put in the color of the plant that they want to put there and kind of, shade in this diagram to get a good idea of exactly what they want. So, okay.
All right.
So,
And then, I'm sorry, go on, Irma.
you go ahead, Jack.
No, you can take this line.
Oh, okay. Okay, so preparing the site. This is really important as well. Site prep is the most important component. Step number one, removing the sod. And when we're doing our rain gardens, typically we're using shovels. We're just digging to remove, and often it's fairly simple. It may be a lot of work if you have a big space, but not too complicated. The other thing that you can do is, as shown here, is you can just smother it. You can put paper down that will kill the grass. You'll have to leave it down for some period of time, but that is an easier way. Certainly, no significant manual labor required. So smother it. You can use a sod remover, which is pictured here. I have a neighbor that has a sod remover, but it's manual. He does it. He just kind of scooches it along along the surface of the lawn, and it comes up fairly easily, fairly quickly. Or you can till it, or any combination of the above. And then how we prepare our rain gardens after we've removed the sod and maybe dug a little bit of the dirt out to create that depression that Jackie talked about. The next thing that we do is add a compost sharp sand combination. And that's the growing medium, very healthy growing medium for your native plants. So next, directing, the whole point, we're capturing stormwater. So how do we direct that rainwater / stormwater to flow into the garden? So typically we're disconnecting our downspouts, or in many cases, your downspouts are already disconnected from the storm drains. So, and then you add an extension to it. Here you can see a black corrugated pipe that's been attached to the downspout, and then it's directed to the garden. And also in this instance pictured here, that pipe is buried under a little piece of lawn. And so it comes out right into the rain garden itself. And if you are in fact disconnecting your downspout from the storm drain, make sure that you are also capping that sewer pipe. They call it, it's like a stove pipe. So you want to cap, you want to cover that. They sell them at Home Depot, these rubber caps that you can put on, or you can mix some chicken wire and cement with paper, and there's a way to kind of mix that up and put that in there and cover it to make sure that there's no rainwater flowing into this pipe that flows along this, your basement wall. So there is a prepared space for your garden. So next is the planting. Jackie?
All right, thanks, Irma. So now is the fun part. This is turning a hole in your yard into a rain garden. So while you're planting, we like to lay out and arrange all of our plants according to our design that we created. So, the shorter plants in the front, taller ones in the back. And typically we will get slightly more matured native plants that come in plugs. So when you're planting a plug, you want the top of that plug level with the soil. We don't want to put it too deep because then it's going to get inundated and rot. And we don't want to put it too high because then the roots at the top are going to dry out and that plant's going to die. So we don't want you to lose a lot of plants if you can help it. And as Irma, as we were kind of talking about it with the design, planting in clusters, clusters of odd numbers typically look the most nice to the human eye. And it's going to be a lot easier if you plant in clusters when you go to maintain your garden. Because if you have just like one plant here, one plant there, you're going to maybe forget which is which, maybe think it's a weed, accidentally pull it. We don't want that either. So also to help prevent that, we like to put in plant labels. So once we have that cluster, we put a plant label in there so we know what that cluster is. So when they start popping up, we can see if it's a weed or the plant that we actually wanted there. And then the best time to plant is in spring. So getting close right now. It might be a little early, maybe this week. Most nurseries won't have a lot of native plants available yet. They're maybe still growing and getting those trays started. Or if you're like me, maybe you're a little busy during the spring and the summer, or you're what I call myself, a lazy gardener. So instead of planting it in spring and having to water it throughout the summer, if you plant it in the fall, give it enough time before our first frost, because we still want those plants to be healthy and survive. If you plant in the fall, they're able to kind of establish those roots in the late fall and early spring. And that makes it a lot easier. And that way you won't have to water them. And they're good to pop up in the spring. And then the final layer is our mulch. We like to do a nice thick 3-inch layer or so around the plants in the garden and over the berms to help suppress the weeds, keep the grass out. Another thing that we like to do on the berm, since typically we're taking the grass chunks out of where we dug, we'll flip them over grass side down so it kills the grass. And then we like to have some non-glossy newspaper, like we showed that you can smother that grass earlier with. You can also put that over the berm, top it with some mulch, and that will help keep some weeds and the grass out as well. And of course, the mulch layer is really important. It helps retain the moisture in the garden when it gets water. Shade out those weed seeds that might be in the soil. And over winter and into the fall, it acts like a nice little blanket for your plants as well. And then maintenance. Maintenance is the most important. Like Irma mentioned, they aren't no maintenance, but they are low maintenance. So Irma, do you want to talk about some of these maintenance practices?
Yes, I do. So I have a couple of rain gardens, and maintenance is absolutely essential. So watering is important, especially as you're first establishing your garden. Weeding, even with your best effort, we do believe that the mulch is very helpful. In some cases, we put paper down after we've planted the plants. Newspaper just kind of around the plant. You don't want to cover the stem or where the root is, because we want to make sure we're getting water to it. And then put mulch on top of the paper to help with controlling weeds. But at some point, I don't know how or why. No, actually I do. But dandelions seem to find their way no matter what. At least in my garden. So
oh yeah, definitely.
Weeds will come. So you do have to try to stay on top of that. And just, just don't plant it and walk away, right? So you want to look at it, you want to enjoy it. So you'll note, and if if you're weeding like on a fairly regular basis, you can keep that under control. And then edging. I find also that the border, we talk about building the berm around the garden, is a little higher right than the garden, because you're using that to prevent any of the rainwater from escaping the garden. So just a bit of a berm, maybe 4 inches or so. And I find that, sometimes, and then we put mulch on top of it, so it's really pretty. But you're going to want to make sure that edging is, you want to stay on top of that, because it's, your lawn, the grass sometimes tries to creep into to where the berm is. So just keep that smothered, I feel, with the mulch to try to control that. Again, you could put paper, then mulch, just to, and it also often it lowers, it settles. So you want to keep it kind of high, again, to keep that stormwater in the garden itself. Pest control, I personally haven't seen many pests in terms of bugs kind of in my garden, not much. I'm not saying they're not there, just it hasn't been a problem for me, but we don't really want to use pesticides. We're trying to prevent that. And so, but you know, if needed, I know in vegetable gardens, we put the soapy water to get rid of aphids. I'm not sure if that helps also with the flowers, but it's something to think about. And invasive plant control. So definitely, I have seen in some of the larger bioswales or big linear rain gardens that are a little deeper, Phragmites will get, and that's one of the main invasive species that I'm aware of. And that's, I've not seen them in rain gardens. It's just not attractive. They want a place that has a lot of water. I mean, like huge amounts. But definitely pay attention because we do have other, and Jackie, you may know a little bit more about the invasive plant controls or the species, but definitely want to keep those from being in your garden. Trimming, and then planting, transplanting, and thinning. So we also do that. I for whatever reason, you know, there I have a space in one of my gardens. It just, you know, I am having trouble finding. So I you know, something that stays healthy in that spot. So I am trying different things, transplanting and replanting. And, you know, sometimes you just want a little, maybe a little extra color so you could plant something else. And sometimes you'll have one plant that just goes nuts. I have an aster that's really grown a lot. And so you may have to thin that back. And of course, adding the fresh mulch.
And the really nice thing about thinning and transplanting is you can share your plants with other folks. So if you join up with a garden group, or there are a lot of plant swaps that happen across the region. That's a great source to get rid of some of your plants and maybe get some new ones too. And then of course, the last step.
We have one of our rain gardens to the rescue rain gardeners. This is Lois. I spoke to her the other day. I was hoping she could join us. Lois absolutely loves her garden. She was one of our early participants. She has put a wire, a metal fence, a kind of low metal fence around her garden. So it's very defined in terms of that edging. So it's very defined, and it's just beautiful. And you can see, you know, the butterfly at the top, that's, you know, the butterfly weed. And they come, believe me, every time I visit Lois's garden, there are butterflies in her garden. So enjoy.
And then of course, big or small, we want rain gardens for all. So whether it's a residential garden like pictured here, this is one of our rain gardeners. She was, to get the water to her garden, we did like this nice riverbed. So that's another option. I love showing this one. We do larger rain gardens at houses of worship and larger buildings. And then here are just a couple photos of the Friends of the Rouge office. We are in downtown Plymouth in an old school, and they were redoing the parking lot, and we were like, we need to add some rain gardens here. So this was the construction in 2020 and 2021. All of those, we have over 26 rain gardens just on our campus there in downtown Plymouth. So if you want to see some rain gardens in action, we'd love to have you down. We're at 650 Church Street. It's the Plymouth Arts and Recreation Complex. And then once all of those were planted, here is a picture of one of those gardens in action. This is an hour after it's raining, and you can see that it is capturing and managing that wonderful stormwater and keeping it from going out to the streets. And then we have, we just wanted to kind of brag a little bit about all of the beautiful rain gardens that Friends of the Rouge and Sierra Club have put in since 2015, and even a couple earlier in 2011. We have even more rain gardens across the city of Detroit and the Rouge River watershed. And we want you to be a part of that wonderful rain garden family as well. And then next, I know it is 11, but we would love to hear from Carolyn. And if you do have any unanswered questions, we'd love for you to stick around so you can answer those. Or you can follow up with us in an email, and we would be more than happy to answer all those questions as well. So I want to introduce Carolyn Pruitt. If you want to come off mic and introduce yourself to the group and talk a little bit about your rain gardening experience.
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much for being here, Carolyn.
Thanks for having me. So my name is Carolyn Pruitt. I have 2 rain gardens, and initially I was a little intimidated by the thought of managing a rain garden. However, it has been one of the best things that I've done in a long time. There are a few things that actually drew me to the idea of starting one. And it has a lot to do with managing stormwater, but then also wanting to solve a problem. So the picture you see on the screen is an actual photo of the street that I live on and what it looks like during a heavy rainstorm. And that can be very frustrating for the residents that live on the street, but also when learning about the various waterways and things we can do to positively impact the environment. I just felt the urge to take action. And so luckily through a community newsletter, I learned about Friends of the Rouge and this opportunity. And again, it's just been something that has not only enhanced the quality of life on this particular street, but it is trickling out beyond throughout the neighborhood. Thank you for this photo too, because I struggled finding some of the earlier photos of my garden. Initially, when connecting with Friends of the Rouge, I had this larger idea of managing that water that you saw collected in the street. And luckily for me, Cindy and Jackie and others helped me kind of navigate my own personal garden first. And so it was an opportunity for me to get my hands dirty and learn the techniques required to maintain a garden. And so what we essentially did was in my yard, there was kind of like this indentation in the lot. It once was a residential parcel, so there was a home there, and the indentation in my mind was a perfect way to kind of take care of the stormwater management. So this particular site has 2 connections from my downspouts, one towards the front of the home and one towards the back of the home. It stretches alongside of my property and even out into the front of my property line as well, as you can see here. I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head how much stormwater that I'm managing with this particular rain garden, but I will say it's been a wonderful experience watching it and maintaining it. Each year I find something new that I planted. It's like a wonderful surprise. There's each year it gets bigger, it gets better. So I would say if you haven't already started your own, once you get started, it'll be hard to stop. And the whole idea of the low maintenance is very true. And in that, one thing you want to also be mindful of, and I believe I heard Jackie mention it, is you just don't want to get too anxious with pulling things, especially when it's the start of a new season. I am guilty of pulling flowers thinking they were weeds. Jackie, did you want me to talk about the other project as well? The
Yes, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that project. I was
Okay.
trying to grab a good photo, but I don't. So they'll
Okay.
have to come out on our upcoming event to see it.
Yes. Well, I have a couple photos I can share.
Oh yeah, if you'd love to share your screen, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, let's see.
And then as Carolyn's pulling that up, if I could give one piece of advice to potential rain gardeners, kind of like how Carolyn was speaking about it, is that the garden is a living, breathing, ever-changing thing. So sometimes you'll have plants be popping up in new areas. You can maintain those yourself, and just kind of realizing that it can and will change over time. So back to you, Carolyn.
Thanks. So again, with the whole idea of problem solving in this particular neighborhood, not only was the street flooding, but there's a lot of vacant space that was either overgrown or being used for other purposes. So this is kind of an idea of what we were working with initially, and this is before, of course. This is the design. Irma, spoke about much of like how to construct a design for yourself. And while mine seems very complex, it was more of a challenge, and I was able to design it with a lot of help. But there are some things to also consider, and I achieved this through PowerPoint. So that's another option if you are wanting to create your own design. I find it to be very, very helpful. This is an aerial view right before we got started. So the design you saw that I was able to create in PowerPoint lended itself to this this reality here. And so what we did was we came out to the site and actually plotted the design, not only where the actual walking path would be, but also the various garden beds that would accommodate that space as well. Because it is such a large amount of water that we are planning to maintain, there are some specifications that were required to do that. And this is kind of where I've found some of my painstakes, right? My headache moments, and it has a lot to do with managing or navigating city processes. So should you decide that you want to expand or have a larger rain garden, sometimes it does require permits. And so that can be a challenge. I would suggest that when you're planning, to make sure you stay ahead of that, because sometimes it takes a little bit longer and can delay significantly your project and the progression of it. But what you can see here is you can also see an aerial view of the street and the stormwater in the blue to the left of your screen. So what essentially will happen is the water that drains down the street, it will be captured in the rain garden inside of the space. And the design that you saw is the walking path, and just to the left of that is where the rain garden will be. And you can also see there are some specifications about how much rainwater it will manage and capture, so forth and so on. This is a real live photo of what we've accomplished so far. And this is not including the planting that we did last year. As you can imagine, this season, nothing has started to come up just yet, but this is a far cry from where we started. So it's really exciting. Another really important component is, I think, about the rain garden aspect is that there are so many people who want to get involved. You'll be surprised with how many of your neighbors want to come out and enjoy your garden with you, maybe even help you install it, and even be encouraged to start their own. This is another angle of the garden. This is actually where the rain garden will be installed. And we're not quite here yet. We're planning for this within the next few weeks. Again, referring back to the permitting process that has delayed some things. But again, you can see how this space will be utilized for community use, and it actually it will solve a problem. And that, I think, is the beauty of the rain garden. Like it solves so many problems while creating a beautiful space to enjoy. Not only for you, but the native wildlife as well. And I think that's all I have to share as it relates to photos. I did neglect to um, add photos of flowers from my rain garden, my home rain garden. So forgive me for that. But again, it takes time, and I think that over time you'll enjoy it more and more each year. At least I have.
Thank you so much. That was beautifully said, Carolyn. And thank you for those photos. Those are absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
If folks want to come out to that site and maybe help maintain the garden, when's our upcoming event there?
Thank you for asking. So we actually are hosting a day in the park on Earth Day, which is April 22nd. We will be doing some, maintenance in the park. We'll also be cutting down some trees and repurposing some of that wood also. That's again April 22nd, and it is from noon to 2.
And we will share out the registration link in our follow-up email so folks can sign up for that. So awesome. Thank you again so much, Carolyn, for coming on. Thank you everyone else for joining and learning about rain gardens today. We have just a little bit of time for some questions. And again, we will be following up with everyone with some additional resources, including of our favorite plant lists that have all the info you need to be successful for your rain garden. We will also include some upcoming events and programs. Let me actually share my screen again, just for some last minute additional information, including some upcoming 2023 programming. So at the top, we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times throughout the presentation, our Rain Gardens to the Rescue program with Friends of the Rouge and Sierra Club. This year's focus area communities are the Detroit 48217 zip code, the city of River Rouge, and Dearborn South End neighborhood. So if you live or have any friends that live in those communities, have them go to our website, therouge.org, and find that information and application. We'll also be sending that link in the follow-up email as well. We're going to have our workshop training sessions at Kimony Rec Center, and those just workshop classes where we go more in depth about everything we went over today, go through and help you design your own garden. The course part is free and open to the public. So we would love to have you. And if you do want to try to get a garden through that program, we do have an application process, and that is up on our website as well. Some additional programs, we also teach a Master Rain Gardener course. Friends of the Rouge and several other Southeast Michigan watershed organizations just finished up our virtual winter course about a month ago. But the Washtenaw County Water Resources and River Raisin Watershed Council are holding an in-person Master Rain Gardener course. It's 5 weeks. Spots are limited, and they do start, I believe, next week on the 19th. So we'll have that link in the follow-up email as well. If you live in the Ypsi, Ann Arbor area, that is a wonderful course to join. The Huron Clinton Metro Parks will also be holding some upcoming Master Rain Gardener courses. Check out their website for more info on that, or feel free to reach out to me and I will get you the appropriate resources. They do also have a pre-recorded do it on your own time course available on the Washtenaw County Water Resources webpage. And then if you're looking for a wonderful source of native plants, Friends of the Rouge is currently taking orders for our spring sale. We have both single species flats if you just want a lot of one species, or there are also kits. There is also a rain garden kit too. So it has with a good variety of wonderful plants that are perfect for a rain garden. And if maybe you're looking to get some more landscaping expertise, Friends of the Rouge has several staff members that are landscape experts and landscape architects. And we are offering tiered services on our website as well. Whether it's just brainstorming, what kind of stormwater issues or wildlife, environmental goals that you have for your yard, or all the way to a full conceptual planting design. We have several tiers there. So you can check out all of our products and services at therouge.org/store. And again, we just want to thank everyone so much for taking the time today to join us for this presentation. We hope that you've learned a lot about rain gardens. You have those burning questions, you're excited to get out there and start digging your hole. In our post-event email, we will also have a link to the post-event survey. We would love for you to fill it out. Let us know how we did and how we can improve, along with your entry into our raffle for a 50-gallon rain barrel. So you can start managing stormwater with this rain barrel like as soon as possible. And we do also want to acknowledge that this presentation was generously funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, who is also our funder for this year's Rain Gardens to the Rescue program. Irma, any final thoughts from you as well?
Oh, yes. Just thank you, everyone. There were some great questions asked, and I tried to answer some of the questions, but there's consultation through Friends of the Rouge. Someone asked about that lives in the Clinton River watershed, and so there's also the Clinton River Watershed Council. Jackie mentioned the Washtenaw County, as well as River Raisin in the Monroe area. So there are lots of resources, the watershed, the Huron River Watershed Council as well. So there are lots of resources. We're going to send you some great resources to refer to. And we'd love to see you back and see pictures of your rain garden once it's established. So thank you and happy planting.